to living ethically with dogs. Obviously, we have like a pretty intimate group today, which is like a good thing. You see that I have dogs. I have dogs in my title slide. I have dogs throughout the photos of dogs throughout this presentation. It's just like my effort to like sort of put more eyes on some of the dogs that are like adoptable that we know. Obviously, this is my dog, so he's not up for adoption. But I'll point out, as we go, the dogs that are in rescue. If there's anyone here or not here, who would be considering something like that. So Jordan and Shyla are our title slide dogs up for adoption. Okay, so my boy again. Your presenters. So I'm Kay, this is Nicole, right? I want to make sure that everybody who's seeing this presentation is aware that I'm not a vet and I'm not a certified trainer, just an animal care worker, right, with 2.5 years, I think, in rescue work. And I have a certificate in animal care, I have a certificate in animal welfare, but I just want to like share like information that I've learned throughout being in, working in the animal care industry over this time, and cram as much of that as I can into a presentation to share with you guys. The purpose of this seminar, you probably know if you saw it through the Facebook page. I don't know how many of you guys have, but essentially I just want to give any information that I can to make dog guardians more able to create a safe space or a way for our dog companions to thrive. It's a very human world, so it's easy for them not to thrive unless we set them up for success. Or if anyone was interested in adopting a dog, if maybe you don't have a dog and you don't want a dog, you just want to know more about how to advocate for them in the world, that's what this seminar is for. And I won't touch on this a lot. I won't touch on a lot of things a lot because I'm trying to cram a lot of things into a presentation and not make it super long. But I just want to mention speciesism being a term that we often use to describe animals that we like farm commonly and how we like exploit them for our needs and stuff like that. We tend to forget sometimes that dogs is also a species that we exploit for our needs as well. Whether that's something extreme like eating them or tourism like in the dog sledding industry, but also sometimes just our expectations of what we require from them as a companion, it may be unfair to them. Okay, dog body language and behavior. This is the heftiest portion of this seminar, just so you guys are all prepared mentally, because I think this is the most important. Of all the topics I'm going to cover in this presentation, if you can have a better understanding of your dog's body language, obviously you have a better understanding of what they're trying to communicate to you, and how you can sort of meet their needs better. And to point out again, Bandit and Shyla and Bella, all up for adoption currently. I chose them to put on this slide because Behaviour. And all of these dogs, some of you guys know these dogs, they all have behavioral issues. Bella came to the shelter very touch sensitive. She's come a super long way though. I would barely even say that about her anymore. Shyla mostly with resource guarding and Bandit mostly with reactivity to strangers, but I'll go over what that means later. Okay, reading dog body language. So this is like a lot on one slide, a lot of words on one slide, because there's a lot of different body languages that dogs can use to show us that they're stressed, or that they're warning us that they need space from us. And all these things on this slide, this is not even a comprehensive list, because I didn't even put whining on here. I don't think I put excessive drooling on here either. Raised hackles I didn't put on here. There's other things that we can use that are not even on this list. Again, I'm not going to dive super in depth to this because I can't, because I don't have time to. But it would be easy to do like an entire presentation on like this slide, essentially. So I'll go over just a couple of them. Obviously, I don't need to explain to any of you what like yawning is, right? But whale eye, some people don't know what that is. So it's also called side eye. And our little Chihuahua friend, is showing us what that looks like. This is just a Google image. I don't know this guy. But that's, yes, side eye or whale eye. And genital checking is what it sounds like. It's just like they turn and check their genitals, essentially just, it looks like they're just checking to see if they're still there. Like it's just a quick look. Painting, I'm sure that you guys know. A paw lift, that's going to be the front paw if they're trying to show that they're uncomfortable. Pancaking being different than cowering. Cowering, like lowering their body. Pancaking is like belly to the floor, which is like actually what my boy's doing right now. Ears pinned, our Chihuahua is also showing us that. Same thing with stiff in his lip there, you can see. I will just talk quickly about rolling onto their back and an appeasement lick, because I think these are things that it's not common knowledge. So a dog rolling onto their back, obviously, most people are going to think that they want a belly rub, which, you know, a lot of times they do, right? But it's important to look at the rest of their behavior, the rest of their body language as well, to make sure that that is actually what they want, because sometimes it can be like a de-escalation behavior to try to show like, I'm not a threat, give me some space. Same thing with an appeasement, like we can be like, oh, they're giving me kisses, they're happy, they like me, but it can also be de-escalating, like, you know, don't hurt me, I'm just gonna exit. So they may just give you like a quick kiss or a quick lick, and it's more just asking for space than giving you affection. Hard eye is the hardest one. I really don't feel like I can accurately explain or show you that. Even if I had an image, I feel like it would be hard to show. The best way for me to sort of describe it is the opposite of averting their gaze. It's almost like making an effort to hold your gaze, which is scary and bad. But it's more so that will be a warning. It's something that you would pick up more the more you see, unfortunately. And some dogs with like their buggy eyes and stuff like that, it can be hard to pick up on. The last thing I'll touch on is biting. So I just want to make sure that I know that this is also a warning, because so many people, when their dog bites them, that's like the worst thing they could do, right? Like the scariest thing that could happen to them. But this is still a courtesy, right? It's still very nice of them to give you the courtesy of just biting you, because they've obviously given some other signs that maybe were just missed, or you know, maybe just you didn't see them, or you ignored them because you thought they weren't that severe, and then they felt, okay, you know, I'm not being heard, so now I need to do something a little bit more severe, and they may need to bite in order to show you like, no, seriously, I need some space. So I think, you know, there's a lot of fear around this one, and obviously I don't want anyone to be bit. I don't want to be bit either. But, you know, if it happens, it's not the end of the world. It's still just a communicative tool. So I have a video. Okay. So I stole this video from R Plus Dog's Instagram page. If you don't follow them, highly recommend. I learn lots from them all the time. So we don't really need the audio, but she's just narrating the behaviors you're noticing in this Rottweiler. Okay, so I'll just play it one more time, so you can see subverting his gaze, gives a whale eye, appeasement lick, and then he leaves. So what I like about this video is that those things were all so subtle, right? And it's not that I was necessarily worried about this dog like biting her in the face or anything like that, but any one of those things would be super easy to miss. Something as simple as just like not looking at you, especially the lick at the end. You'd be like, oh no, he loves her, right? But he was made super uncomfortable. So that when we have like that narrated, we can see like there was like so many multiple attempts that he made there to sort of try to communicate to her like, stop staring at me, I'm uncomfortable, give me some space. That, you know, he wasn't heard, and he took it upon himself to de-escalate the situation, which was very nice of him. Okay, so reading the body language. Just a reminder to assess the whole picture. Eyes, ears, mouth, tail, and body position are all clues to how your dog is feeling. So need to put all those things together to get a full view of how they're really feeling. An individual sign of stress does not always equal discomfort. You know, some obvious ones, like if your dog is panting, maybe they're hot, right? Maybe they're not stressed. But it could be a sign of stress. Same thing with a lip lick, like maybe they're not stressed, maybe they're just anticipating a treat, maybe they're just nauseous, right? So it's important to look at the whole picture and see, like, are they otherwise relaxed? Are they otherwise happy? And get a better idea of how they're feeling. And just a quote that I liked that I added. Okay, one more video. This is Turkey. This is my roommate. This is checking for consent. So the point of checking for consent is just to make sure that we're never giving unwanted, you know, affection or imposing ourselves onto dogs when they don't want it, because obviously they have boundaries and we need to respect those boundaries. And you can see every time that I stop, Turkey is making an effort to re-engage with me. Now typically I wouldn't stop that often when I'm petting Turkey. I know Turkey very well, so I know that I could pet him a lot longer without him being uncomfortable, but I'm trying to make a point in this video, right? If I don't know the dog very well, I might follow a 3-second rule of physical contact and stop to see if they want to re-engage with me or not. But if I know them much better, you might go 10 seconds or more, right? And stop and just check, not necessarily just for signs of stress, but to see if they actively want to re-engage with you, like, right, depending on how well you know this dog or how comfortable this dog is with you. I'll show that one more time. Because I also want to know how, you see how relaxed he's, like, basically asleep. All of his body language is while I'm doing this. So typically I wouldn't need to stop when I'm stopping, because I'm not seeing any signs of stress. But it's a good insurance policy for me to know that this is still, you know, he's consenting to this, this affection from me. Okay, range of behavioral challenges. Sorry, my mouth is dry. Okay, so I have these in 2 columns, right? The difference between these 2 columns are these behaviors, like behavioral challenges. So I'm going to say no, because all of these behaviors are natural behaviors, right? That a dog, depending on the dog, will show these behaviors, but they can be a nuisance, right? They can be a nuisance trying to live with these dogs in our homes. Versus these behaviors, yes, some of these still come from a natural place, but a lot of times based out of an insecurity or a fear, and a lot of times posing more of a potential danger to you or another person, depending on the severity of that behavior. It's all of them exist on a spectrum of severity, of course, because something like resource guarding, it could be as minor as, like, don't touch them while they're eating, which is easy to do, right? And probably why would you do that anyway? But, you know, it could be more on the severe end of the spectrum where, you know, they're guarding a room from you, and, like, how do I get in the room safely, right? You know, I don't know. I would probably have to hire a trainer to help me with that. But that's the concern with these, is that these are things that, you know, for me, if any of these things existed on a level of severity that was becoming something that I was unable to manage, at least just through environment, I would have to reach out to a professional, to a force-free trainer to help me figure out how to navigate these issues. Versus these, this is really person to person, right? For whether you even think this is an issue at all. Jumping up specifically, like, he doesn't do it anymore. Like, my boy is almost 13, but for the longest time he would only jump up to say hi to me, and I was honored. So of course I'm encouraging that, like, definitely jump up on me. But, you know, a lot of people don't like that, and they would try to train, you know, the dog not to jump up. Same thing with playing rough. Some people love that, you know, like, yeah, let's wrestle, you know, and that's something they love to do with their dog. But, you know, maybe someone doesn't like having, like, scars and scratches all over their arms. That's also perfectly understandable, and you might want to work on a compromise with your dog, so that they can hopefully show that behavior in a natural way, like still be able to express that behavior, but in a way that's a compromise for the two of you, so that it's safe and it's fun. Yes. Oh, the last thing that I'll mention, sorry, is to keep in mind the certain dog breeds would be more prone to some of these behaviors. So obviously that's not a con to adopting any particular dog breed, but it is something to keep in mind if there was something that you may have a harder time handling on a list of any of these behaviors, like living with in your home, right? That if a high prey drive is a real problem, you might not go out and adopt a pointer. That's probably not going to work out. Same thing with potentially stranger danger. You might not go out and get a dog that's bred to be a guard dog. You're going to be more likely to run into that issue. Training. So busy slide. Again, I'm not going to go super in depth into this topic because we could do a whole presentation on these topics alone, but there's a lot of stuff to get through. But I just wanted to explain what these things are and what it means, because I think it's easy to sort of fall into, what am I trying to say? Like specific words that trainers might use that are vague, that are not fully explaining how some of these tools work. So yes, first thing to touch on is the difference between these three types of training, force-free versus balance versus compulsion. So in the simplest way that I can put it, force-free is the most self-explanatory. It is free of force. It is positive reinforcement based and only that. Balance training is supposed to be the use of both positive and negative stimulus, I guess you would say. They're including both, like you're going to give treats, but you might also give punishment. And compulsion being more the alpha, sort of pack leader way of thinking, and more commonly just using positive punishment and negative reinforcement. So the use of punishment in general. Aversive tools. That is what I mean to say when I'm talking about balanced and compulsion trainers not using only positive reinforcement. They would turn to the use of aversive tools for their training in that case. So just to explain what those are a little bit and what they look like. So the prong collar, I wanted to show both what it looks like on and off the dog, because you might not notice the prongs if you just see them walking with this collar on. So again, I don't know either of these dogs. These are just Google image dogs, but he's just sporting and showing what this would look like on him. So just to explain how this tool works, it's obviously you can see it's the prongs poking into the neck, and so it's supposed to be the pressure from these prongs in the neck to deter from the undesirable behavior that they want to correct, essentially. So the issue with these collars, now that I'm back in vet med now. I was in rescue for about 2.5 years, but now I'm working at a vet emergency clinic. From these collars, we do see punctures in the skin, and we do see collapsed tracheas more commonly than that. There is sort of a myth that dog's skin is thicker than our skin, so they won't feel these prongs as much as we do. But the reality is that there's such a wide range of dog breeds, all the way from, like a Maltese to a Saint Bernard. And it doesn't make sense to assume that both of those breeds will experience this in the same way. There's going to be some breeds that would feel it way more than we do, and some breeds that feel it less. Either way, what they're feeling is discomfort, right? And it's the discomfort and the pain of using the tool that is the deterrent for the behavior. Where am I going here? Okay, so pet corrector. So this is just like a sudden sound, just to jar them out of the behavior. So you would like hold it close enough to their head that it would be loud and startle them. And it's not like an air horn, it's more like a like a ch, like a loud air release. So the sound is what's punishing to stop them from doing the undesirable behavior. We have the shock collar, which is also sometimes called the e-collar, not to be confused with an Elizabethan collar, which is the cone that they'll wear after vet visits. E-collar or shock collar has these prongs, right, on the inside of this box here to deliver the electric shock. When the undesirable behavior occurs, you would deliver that via the remote. I also just want to point out that sometimes you might see a collar with a box that looks similar to this on it. That is a tracking device, which is, perfectly safe and honestly smart to put on your dog, especially if they're a flight risk. And it can be sometimes hard to distinguish the difference when the dog is wearing it. But obviously the easiest way being if they don't have it on, a tracking device is not going to have prongs into the dog. It's just like a little box that you just clip on the collar they're already wearing and would help you find the dog if the dog got lost. So martingale, this is a fabric one. My boy has the metal one on right now. I don't want to bug you though, I'll actually leave you. I was going to take it off and show you, but I don't want to disturb him. But essentially this part is metal on him. And this is, I'm a fan of these. It's not considered force-free. Just really the harnesses are sort of the ideal for force-free, but harnesses can sometimes be easy for them to slip out of and get away from you. So when I first got my rescue dog, he was incredibly fearful and nervous, and so I was incredibly nervous of him getting away from me, especially because he's so big and strong, and I was just like holding on for dear life when I would be walking him back then. So I definitely I chose this equipment instead because I wanted to, that was my fear, was losing him. But also back at that time, when I was like 19, I didn't know anything about any of this stuff as well. But anyway, that's what the martingale is useful for. And it does tighten like the prong collar does, but it's just like a flat collar. So there's not the pain of the prongs into the neck. It's just a tightening so that they're unable to slip out of the leash and run away. And some of the tools to set up for success. So that's the sort of more force-free equipment that I've posted here. So the back clipping harness is what most force-free trainers will lean towards. I think some are okay with any harness in general, but like if you do a front clipping one, to keep in mind that it's going to like put pressure on either shoulder one way that they're pulling. So it depends on how important that is to you. But yeah, I don't know this little guy, but he's just sporting the back clipping harness for us. And this is what a clicker looks like, which is just exactly like makes a click sound. And you would use positive reinforcement to associate that sound with reward, with something positive, so that you could use that as a marker to mark the behavior that you want to see, that you want to reward, as opposed to punishing the behavior that you want to stop. And so I also have a graphic just to show all of them in a clump here. Citronella collars, I actually had to look this up because I've never seen these used. But I learned myself that the citronella collar sprays citronella, but the spray is not the punishment. It's the smell of the citronella that's the punishment. So it's a bad smell, which is punishing, which is arguably less aversive than the electric shock. But of course, if it works and it's meant to be a punishment, then it is creating fear or discomfort, or it wouldn't work, right? They wouldn't stop the undesirable behavior if they weren't like afraid of this punishment, if this is what was being used. I wish I didn't have to include these two. This sort of physical force, the alpha roll, like pinning your dog, is still pretty commonly used, especially in compulsion training. And the word beating is perhaps a little harsh, but we'll say physical force of just sort of physically manipulating your dog or their body into what you want to see from them. So the results of force-free versus aversive methods. So again, I'll just quickly touch on that. But what I want to explain about that is that using an aversive tool will almost always work faster than using a force-free method, because fear is an excellent motivator, right? For me too. Fear is an excellent motivator for anybody. because if you're just treating the symptom and not the cause, you're only punishing the reaction and not curing the reason for that reaction taking place. It's not going to take as much time. But they are still going to have that underlying fear or insecurity or whatever it is that's causing this behavior. And not only, are they still battling with that and feeling that every day, but also it is likely that you're going to have to re-punish them at some point to remind them that, like after they haven't been punished for a while, that you can't express that behavior, or there's going to be consequences. Versus using a force-free approach, you're treating the cause. So it will take longer because you think about it like going to therapy in a way, right? Where it's you're kind of having to resolve a deep insecurity or a deeper issue. But eventually, once you work through that insecurity or fear or whatever it may be, you're not going to need to remind them not to react at that stranger or not to guard the toy or what have you, because they don't feel the need to do that anymore, because they're feeling safe, because they are trusting you, and so it's better long term as well. And just a couple of red flags, some trainer red flags that I'll touch on. So obviously this is a little bit opinion based, right? Take this with a grain of salt. But any trainer that uses pack leader or alpha or dominant, I would not hire. Even punishment or even correction, not a fan. What are we correcting, right? Like redirecting focus is different, that's fine, right? If we're just redirecting them to something positive. But what behavior are we correcting? We should be rehabilitating it instead, right? And another red flag to look for is just lack of certification. Force-free trainers will, almost always, they should have certification, most likely from the Karen Pryor Academy, but I've learned recently that there's like other establishments that are certifying force-free now, which is great. Versus sometimes balance and compulsion. They're not very regulated fields at all, but sometimes they will complete like mentorships and get into training, but sometimes they just are self-starting. They're just like, I know how to do this, and then they just get into doing it professionally. So that's my 2 cents on that. So let's do a case study. This is Riley. She is up for adoption. This is short, but it's just an example of how inappropriate use of this aversive tool, or use of the aversive tool in general, has set her up for failure. To put this into perspective a little bit, she's 6, and she's been at this particular shelter for 4.5 years now. The reason for that is she was a local surrender, and she was surrendered from this home after they used the shock collar in the home. And so when she was shocked in the home, she is very intelligent. This dog is a very smart dog, one of the smartest that I've met personally. I mean, I think using this shock collar around the home just things that you don't want her to be doing. You see her doing a thing that you don't want her to do, and you give her a shock. It's like if you imagine that you're in a room and one day like you turn on a light switch and nothing bad happens. The next day you turn on the light switch and you have an electric shock, and the next day you turn on the light switch and nothing bad happens. Like, it's just when someone's around to see it that they're going to punish you, and that confusion, it's going to make you lose your mind. So she developed fairly severe touch sensitivity as a result of this pain that she experienced from the shock collar in the home, and that behavioral challenge that she's run into has kept her in the shelter for 4.5 years already, which is wild. Because she is otherwise very healthy, fairly young, very sweet dog. Obviously, she can build trust with people to move past this issue. Someone in our audience is very, very good with her, to the point where Riley will seek out touch and affection from this person. So with patience, she can make it through that, but the tool has set her up for failure in that way. So there's one more case study. This is Yugi. He is also up for adoption. He came a very fearful street dog, not from Canada. So he had to go through sort of two unfortunate bouts with aversives here. The first was his leash reactivity. So when he came to the rescue, he was not leash reactive. He was far too nervous and sort of shut down to react at all. And once he built like a little bit more confidence, he was just starting to be okay to just sort of show how insecure he was. And so he started to become leash reactive to other dogs. Yugi is still very fearful and not food motivated, either as a result of this or he's just not food motivated. So some staff decided to use the pet corrector instead. And so every time he would react to another dog on leash, they would spray the pet corrector close to his head, and then that sound, that fear would scare him out of the reaction and he would stop. And the reason why he is unfortunately a very good example of what I'm trying to explain here is because if you ever meet him, if he sees a dog on leash, he will still whine when he sees it, which is evidence that we can see that he's still feeling that same discomfort and fear and wanting to express it, but he knows it's not safe to express that feeling, so he's just suppressing it, right? Reminder that treated the symptom but not the cause. The second sort of aversive was teaching a sit command to him. So we could talk about whether or not it was even necessary to teach a fearful street dog the sit command, but they wanted to teach him this command, and a reminder that he is not food motivated. He is very nervous, so they had sort of one person holding the front of his body and one person holding the back of his body and just forcing him into a sit repeatedly. And so again, if you ever meet him, you'll see that he's unfortunately good evidence of, if you ask him for a sit, that he sits very immediately, and he sits with his back arched, because that's how he would have been forced into that position. It's not like when you would typically lead a dog back into a sit with a treat and they just straight back into a sit. For him, it's very sort of stressful to get into this position. And I won't touch on this very much either, but that is what we call a poisoned cue. When there's a negative association made with a cue, and that unpleasant association, when the cue is, or the command or what have you is said, they're going to feel stress. They might hesitate more to perform that behavior. They might not want to perform the behavior at all, because hearing this word now, hearing sit, is a kind of a scary thing now. Is this another quote that I wanted to include? When your goal shifts from obedience to understanding, you're starting to lead with connection instead of correction. And the reason that I liked this specific quote is because this is actually a parenting quote. But I just thought that it suited so well any species that you were trying to teach something to, right? Exercise and enrichment, right? That's a fun one. So these are all things that we need to keep in mind when we're deciding what is the best way to offer mental or physical enrichment to our dogs. So age, mobility, energy level, and level of mental stimulation that they might need. And they may need varying levels of each of these things. I specifically chose these two dogs that are both up for adoption. This is Sirius, this is Diamond, because this guy is quite a couch potato. If you were in the market for someone who is very low energy, highly recommend. He does get zoomies and he likes to play every once in a while, but for the most part, he really just wants to just lay there. Versus Diamond, who she has calmed down as she's gotten older for sure, but I think she's a Great Dane mix is what she's recorded as, and she's a lot more of a, let's go for a hike, let's go for an adventure, right? Let's have fun. So you would obviously need to give Diamond more mental stimulation, or physical stimulation than you would need to give to a dog like Sirius. There's no reason if a dog doesn't want to have physical stimulation, you don't need to make them do anything that isn't fun for them, because enrichment should be fun for them. I do want to touch on long lines. Before I was in animal care, I don't think I even heard what they were. And not that I would have put my, at that time, very nervous dog on one anyway. But I live in Toronto now, and definitely I think it's an excellent tool if you want to give your dog more freedom in a not city setting. When I go back home to the farm, I walk him on the long line there. Here, it's a lot more secure to have him on the 6-foot leash. But, obviously there's areas around here like trails and stuff that you could walk your dog on a long line. So if you wanted to give them more like 20, 30, 50 feet of freedom versus 6 feet, and that was, safe for them to do, this is a good way to do that, because we had to be very cognizant of, not walking dogs off leash in an on-leash area. Obviously, if you have a dog that can be off leash, that's amazing. And there are a lot of areas in the city that I've noticed that are designated for just that, for off-leash dogs. But there are so many dogs who, aren't necessarily fortunate enough to be able to have something like that, whether they were dog aggressive or maybe more aggressive towards strangers, maybe they're just a flight risk, nervous in general, that they would not be able to have off-leash time, and they are also just as deserving as being able to experience and explore a trail or a park or what have you. So just being aware of if it's not an off-leash area, it's an on-leash area, and long lines are a good way to offer more freedom if you don't want to just have them on your 6-foot leash for your hike. A reminder that enrichment does not have to cost money. It certainly can cost money. I've put thousands of dollars into just traveling with Lucky. It's like the main thing that we do. But even, or buying food puzzles or buying snuffle mats and stuff like that. But it could you just toss some treats in the snow. That's free, as long as you have like their kibble, already. Or you could just like put some kibble in a towel and tie it in a knot. See if they can figure out how to untie that knot. So if money is an issue for enrichment, it doesn't need to be, right? I think outside the box, and there's lots of resources that I can give at the end of this. If anyone was interested in more ways of mentally enriching their dogs. I have a very small list of enrichment examples here. There's a long list of things that you could do. These are just 2 Google images that I have here. This guy is showing off a snuffle mat, and this guy is excited about his flirt pole, which is, as you can see, it's essentially just like one of those rope cat toys, but big, for dogs. Filled Kong and frozen Kong being essentially the same thing, but if you just think of it like a frozen Kong is sort of the advanced level filled Kong, because it's harder to get the insides out. Nose work is a great one to be doing free if your dog is good at it. You could, if you wanted to, if they enjoyed it, if they were good at it, you could teach them like to sit and hold the sit, and you could go around the room and just like hide treats wherever, and then free them or release them or whatever, and then they can go nuts and find all those fun things. Basic obedience can be fun, right? Some dogs don't enjoy it, then they really have no need for it. Some dogs love to learn that kind of stuff and engage with you in that way, and then it's great to teach them all kinds of fun things and tricks that you can show off. Sniffaries, which is just a walk, but a walk that is centric around your dog. So it's not like you're going from A to B. It's like as many times as they want to stop, as long as it's safe to stop there, and sniff whatever they want to sniff. They will get, 100 times more enrichment, being able to interact with their environment in this way than just walking on the sidewalk, from A to B. Fetch, of course, is very popular. Hi, sweetie. And tug as well. Flirt pole is here, and I put swimming just because you can incorporate that with a lot of different things. A friend of mine has a very high energy English setter, and she does fetch into a river every day with her dog, just to tire her out enough that she has to swim back and forth, and burn all of her energy. And going back to gauging what is appropriate, just for a moment, I want to talk about my old man here. So he is still, fortunately, very mobile. He's not the most intelligent dog that I've met. Of course, we can't all have it all, right? So I am not as fixated on trying to give him a copious amount of mental stimulation. We do still sometimes do food puzzles. He is food motivated. We haven't yet found one he can do on his own. We had to do them together. But it's still fun for him, right? If we have the means and the time to do that together. So far what I have found is the most enriching for my boy with his sort of, energy level, which is obviously lower with each passing year as he gets older. And the level of stimulation that he needs mentally is just environmental stimulation, meaning that sniffaris are ideal for him. We throw other things in there. If he's really feeling like he has a lot of energy in the morning, he's a morning person, sometimes we'll work on just like a little bit of basic obedience just for fun, and usually takes him many months to learn something new, which is fine, right? There's no reason he needs to learn, middle is what we've been working on, but place or anything like that quickly. But for the most part, yeah, sniffaris is the way to go for my guy with his sort of where he is in life and the level of mental stimulation that he needs. We are also working on acclimating him to a wagon that I bought to pull him around because obviously, as we know with big dogs, the main issue you run into early is mobility issues. So if that ever does happen and our sniffaris turn into a wagon ride, it would be up to me then to bring the environment to him and have to show him things and put things in his wagon with him. The last thing that I'll touch on for exercise and enrichment is just a reminder that if you do decide that you want to use food-based enrichment, which so many of these are, with a filled Kong, a food puzzle, nose work, all that stuff, is just making sure that you are very educated on what's safe to give to your dogs. So that could be dog to dog as well. My boy has an incredibly sensitive stomach. There's not a lot of things that I can offer him that are super new and exciting. From time to time I could give him like a piece of watermelon or something that's like, he doesn't usually get that, that's fun. But trying a lot of new foods is kind of off the table. But if your dog can try a lot of different things and you want to make their this experience more enriching by introducing new things all the time, as long as you are aware that things like raisins, right, grapes, chocolate, onions, like a corn on the cob, these are things that all can be very dangerous for your dog to have. Not that the corn is toxic, but the cob is like the perfect size to get lodged in their trachea. So things like that. Even like onions can be a sneaky one, because there are onions like as an ingredient a lot of times in things that you might think is okay to give. Like you may be like, I'm going to put a little bit of this tomato sauce at the top of this frozen Kong. It's like a fun, interesting new thing for them to try, which is true. Like if they want to have a little bit of tomato sauce, that's fine. But if there was enough onion in it, it can actually alter the shape of their red blood cells, which is garlic is like that too. Good, yeah, excellent. So yeah, that's another one to look out for. And this, obviously, I'm not giving a comprehensive list as well. Definitely, I'd urge to do your own research as well and find there are lots of things that we can have that dogs cannot. Okay, so vetting and medical needs. This is Mocha. She's also up for adoption. I put her here just because she already had surgery on both of her knees. But I won't touch on this too much either. But I will talk about what a fear-free vet is. So I'm not saying that you need to have a fear-free vet. Again, I'm not from Toronto, from a very rural area. And the vet that Lucky and I have had throughout, our lives together. She is not certified fear-free, but I love her. I love her. She uses a lot of fear-free practices in what she does, which is why I love her. But we like the fear-free certification because if you are looking for a new vet, right, you can look out for this as a certification to know up front that these are the philosophies that they're going to be putting into caring for your pet. So fear-free is, just in its simplest terms, it's not super comprehensive, but it's just a course that your vet would take that would certify them in things like low-stress handling, and with the goal to make every visit to the vet as low stress as possible, right? It's not going to be no stress, right? Because it's never no stress going to the hospital. You know, I guess maybe for some dogs they're just so excited to have any attention at all that maybe it will be fun. But there are a lot of dogs that obviously aren't going to enjoy having to get a needle or having to get a rectal temperature or something very uncomfortable like that. A fear-free certified vet is just certified to know how to be able to make this as stress-free as it can be for your dog, which is great, obviously. But what's most important is just to find a veterinarian that you trust. Again, I would urge if you're looking for a new one to look out for the certification, because it just makes things easier to find a newer vet that has those philosophies. But in general, this is what's most important. As long as you have a vet that you know is really caring enough to have the highest standard of care for your pet. Excuse me. Preventative medicine. So yeah, this is just, it's a very short list. But regular checkups are just a way to make sure that, honestly, for you, you're not running into as big of expenses down the road when you don't realize something was going wrong, and then it was been going wrong for years, and you go and you find out this could have been caught years ago and it wouldn't have been as big of an issue. But also to keep them more happy and healthy, regular checkups it's the best preventative as well for their mental health, because as we know, a lot of times new behavioral challenges that can arise for something like touch sensitivity especially can have a medical cause. Hello. And so we can avoid that. We can avoid, you know, oh, why are they all of a sudden, they're aggressive for this? You know, well, it could be pain, and we can prevent that with the best, you know, ability to prevent that when we're doing regular checkups. Vaccines, that's a given. Everybody knows that you should be doing vaccines for your dog, but not everybody does do them. The thing that I will say about vaccines is that it is actually illegal not to get the rabies vaccine. So if you don't want to get the vaccines, get them. But if you're not going to get them, definitely get the rabies vaccine. It is illegal not to have that. Obviously, it's an incredibly lethal disease to have. So for dogs and for humans, right? So that's the most important. Parasite prevention. I am super passionate about that as a topic, because I do think that it's something that is often looked past as not as important as preventative medicine, like something like vaccines. But technically, in the Canadian Criminal Code, where there's barely any mention of animal rights, it is neglect not to give parasite prevention. It is a big deal. If you think about all the diseases that all those parasites can carry, not just for your dog, but also for you, and you think about how you would feel, obviously, if you had 2 or 50 bugs crawling on you, you would want someone to help you out with that, I'm sure. You know, or if obviously intestinal worms is a whole other topic, but you know, specifically my boy, I'll keep going back to him. When I adopted him, he had such a heavy burden of whipworms in his intestines that there's so much scar tissue in there now from all that blood loss from his intestines that now he has to be on this prescription diet. Otherwise, it's just diarrhea constantly. So, you know, if he had parasite prevention for the first 6 years of his life, he could probably eat normal things. Spay and neuter, I'm not going to go too much into that as a preventative medicine, even though like it is, more so population control, right? Obviously, you're going to prevent any disease or debilitation of an organ if you remove it, right? But especially thinking about not creating another litter that needs to find homes. You know, we know from working in rescue work that shelters are at capacity, shelters are full, and we don't want to be creating any more beings that need to be in an environment as isolating and stressful as that. And I know that, you know, people also think, well, this is an indoor dog, they're never going to run into, you know, an unspayed or unneutered dog, but, you know, things happen, right? I think of myself as a fairly responsible dog owner. Lucky has gone away from me twice in the 6 years that I've had him. Never out of my sight, fortunately, but it could have gone very differently, right? And if that had just been slightly different and he had gone off wherever, unneutered, how many litters can he, create within that short amount of time that I don't have eyes on him, right? And that's, of course, was not my malintent, or obviously his, but being on top of that preventative is going to keep the shelters less full. To put that a little bit into perspective, I know that's me, I'm sorry. I know that in 2021, I don't know what it was in 2022, apologies, but in 2021 it was 2,300 dogs that were euthanized just in government shelters in Canada. So I don't know anything about the privately run ones or the nonprofit ones. I don't know if they would do something like that or not. But that's already a very high number, obviously. So we want to keep that number from getting any higher, just due to having no space for those dogs. The Gab-Traz combo, that's gabapentin and trazodone, something that fear-free vets will probably utilize a lot, something that I've used for my boy a lot. It's just a combination of medications to help sort of calm and sedate your dog before they go into the vet, which of course is not going to fix them hating the vet or being nervous or scared. They're not going to I'm not scared now that I'm sleepy. Of course they're still scared, but it's just useful to, if there's a procedure that would have taken 3 people in 20 minutes to do because they had to hold down your dog that was fighting, muzzled to try to get this done. Of course that is going to be more traumatic than still being scared, but it's done in 2 minutes, right? Now you're able to build to something that is less scary every time that you go. And I will say for my boy, who is notoriously terrible at the vet, and he was muzzle trained for that purpose, for going to the vet. The last 2 times we went, he hasn't needed it. And we have been using the Gab-Traz combo for a while now to try to sort of facilitate being less afraid of the vet. So I'm very proud of him for that, and we have found success in it. He also didn't need the Gab-Traz combo last time, so. Cooperative care, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject and say
Please
something
do.
Before I take off, which is
okay.
about preventive measures. I think going beyond vetting, preventive measures can be taken outside of vets. So for example, if you have a large breed dog, you might at an early age start joint and bone supplements at home, which you can get and not out of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't have to be a pharmaceutical medication.
Mm-hmm.
And there are all kinds of natural alternatives that are perhaps chemical-free, non-toxic, that is available should people want to consider those alternatives. There's alternatives for gabapentin too.
Right.
I'm sure you probably know some, there are synthetic pheromones, there are CBD oil for pets that helps with anxiety, but I just want to say that there are preventive things and helpful things for your animal that goes beyond what's available through a vet.
Yes, 100%. That's an excellent point. My boy has been on the glucosamine supplements for the whole 6 years that I've had him, to support his joint health, because mobility can be such a big issue in big dogs. That's an excellent point.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, definitely for all of these topics, we could go so much more in depth on every single one of these topics, and probably easily do a half an hour presentation on each of these things if we had the time. But yeah, absolutely, lots you can do beyond the vet. And setting up for success at the vet, you can go to cooperative care. So I have some resources for that at the end of this presentation, but that can be just as simple as getting your dog used to looking into their ears or holding onto their paws, or things that you wouldn't normally do that could freak them out or sketch them out at the vet, why is a stranger touching me in this way? Or it could be something slightly more advanced, training them to do some sort of obedience or trick behavior to hold a position that would make it easier to examine them. But I have more resources for that at the very end. I do have to consider insurance on this presentation in the interest of transparency. I don't have that. I personally save all of my money for travel and my dog. So anything that I make just goes into him or traveling with him, really. But of course, not a lot of people want to live like that. So it is a good option. I do have a few friends who take advantage of it, and I've heard good things. So especially if you have concerns for things that are unexpected, you never know if there's going to be like a trauma. There could be an unexpected dog fight. You could have a broken limb. You never know when an ailment is going to come up, right? And you could save yourself from like a $10,000 vet bill, you know, from a monthly payment. Because even without those unexpected vet expenses, you know, obviously with all the things that we put into caring for our dogs, you know, with whatever food, treats, enrichment, registration, maybe poop bags you're I don't know, spending your money on, that you know, all that stuff adds up even before vet bills like that. A diet especially, like I said, my boy's on a prescription diet, so that, and he's big, as you can see. He's somewhere between 86 and 88 pounds usually, and so he costs me usually about $140 per dogs. Yep, $140 per month on that food. That's not including the wet food that I buy him just for fun. So definitely keep that in mind, because it adds up. So that goes right into diet. So controversial topic. Initially, I'm going to touch on raw diets. So I do understand the draw to raw diets. I do understand it because we want to eat whole ingredients. That's like the healthier way for us to eat, and we think that that's the best thing to do for our companions as well. We think, you know, we want to just know what we're eating. We want to know what they're eating, right? Unfortunately, it is an incredibly unregulated. It is a 100% unregulated diet, and there, to my knowledge, things have changed. There aren't any like veterinary practice approved raw diets at this time. There are approved recipes, which is different. You could get a vet approved recipe and cook your own if you wanted to go down that sort of financial road. And if you have the time as well, that's an option. But you know, when you go into the pet store and you see like a tube of meat or what have you, and that is a diet that someone has created and packaged and sold, there is no regular. I could do that. I could do that next month. You know, I could just create a name and put something together and find someone to carry that, and I could sell it, right? But if you think about it, you know, a dog is an omnivore, you know, humans are omnivores. If there's any one ingredient that I could eat, right, while I give him his tube of meat, I'm not going to have all the micro and macro nutrients and vitamins that I need, whether it was like a tube of mushrooms or bananas or whatever, right? Like there's nothing, no one ingredient that I could eat that's going to keep me 100% healthy and balanced, and it's the same for them if you know, really think about it. So I urge away from those. It's I'm not saying there aren't any that are balanced. I don't know of any that have been regulated or tested to be proven that they are. Our regulations and laws around dog food in general in Canada are already pretty poor. So for something that is a lot newer on the market, raw diets in comparison to something like kibble, it can be very treacherous and confusing to navigate. So on top of that, on top of all of that, that information about diets, the last thing I'll mention is how much it increases the risk of coming into contact with disease-causing bacteria, both for the dog and for the person. E. coli, Salmonella, and Listeria, just to name a few, that from the feces and the saliva, both, that you are more likely to come into contact with. I don't know if it's common knowledge or not, but at the vet, like if someone brings in a dog that's on a raw diet, like we always ask like what diet they're on when they come in, right? At the Emerge clinic that I work at, we are supposed to only be interacting with this dog wearing gloves. because their saliva can be harboring high levels of these disease-causing bacteria. And of course, we don't want to get sick. We don't want to get any of the other dogs sick. So keep that in mind, that if you're putting your dog on a raw diet, they're a little bit of a hazard, coming into this this veterinary environment. It is a lot easier to get sick. Yes. Okay, so vegan diet. So I won't speak too much to this. I'm not the most knowledgeable person on this topic. The main thing is I will say is consult your vet. I know that there are some more well-known brands that carry these diets that are vegan, and I know that some of them have been vet approved and have been regulated. But I don't know to speak to which ones to recommend to you. So if this is something that you're interested in, ask your vet, right? Because they're going to know. They're going to know which ones are safe and actually balanced to be giving, because the vegan diets, just like literally any other dog diet, they're not always going to be regulated or balanced or safe, regardless of what kind of diet it is. So it's important to check in with their doctor. But I mean, to point out, my dog is not on a vegan diet. He's on a prescription diet. This is what he needs to keep his gastrointestinal health okay. Responsibility of your dog's weight. So, I'm sure everyone has noticed out in the world that dogs' obesity is at an all-time high, which is the responsibility of us, right? Just like a kid, right? Like if you just give them whatever they want to eat all the time, they'll just eat it. We're the ones feeding them, so it's up to us to make sure that we are keeping an eye on what their weight is and what is their healthy weight supposed to be. And again, consulting your vet on, especially when you have a mixed breed, it can be hard to know exactly what their ideal weight is, because body condition scoring can be challenging. But if you get what their ideal weight is supposed to be, you can keep a closer eye on that and keep them healthier in that way. The last thing that I will say again is that dogs are omnivores. And I know that some people would be uncomfortable purchasing a diet that has meat or animal byproducts in it, which is completely okay. That's completely okay. Whatever aligns with your morals, right? Whatever makes you most comfortable, but it's important to keep in mind that if the species you decided to adopt was an omnivore, was a dog, that at some point they may require that, and that has to be something that you can align with if that's a decision that you make. Especially when it comes to prescription diets, we have, for example, the renal diet for kidney failure, none of those are vegan. But the problem with kidney failure is that so many of those dogs don't want to eat, right? Nothing is palatable enough. So they have these specifically formulated things to encourage them to be eating at all and support renal health. So in that situation, to support their health and well-being and for them to be able to eat, you would have to invest in a diet that would not be vegan. So that's worth keeping in mind. Okay, so grooming. Probably one of the shortest slides. This is Leroy. He's up for adoption as well. Senior guy. I put him on here because of his touch sensitivity in regards to grooming. But yeah, this is just a short one. Catered to the individual. So important to know a little bit about whatever dog you have, their coat type, right? Do they have any skin issues and their needs? You definitely don't want to. You want to make sure that you're not shaving a dog whose coat shouldn't be shaved. If you have a double-coated dog like me, that you brush them a lot. I only bathe my dog once or twice a year. And that seems to kind of be our sweet spot. I certainly don't want to get rid of any of the good greases that he has underneath his double coat there, but I don't want him to get too dandruffy or anything that would make him itchy or uncomfortable, right? So finding that balance, you can get information from your groomer, but I would still urge you to ask your vet about that as well, because groomers Of course, the more experienced they're going to know more about this stuff, but of the schooling, it's going to be more focused on, of course, completing the grooming that needs to be done and how to do that and how to do that well versus potentially if there are things like skin issues, or if it's a mixed breed with a kind of a mystery coat, right? This can be a stressful practice. So we think of the salon and the hospital as two very different places, but they can be very similar for our dogs, right? Because there's strangers and it's loud and there's a lot of touching and it can be very invasive. And it can be painful if they're going for something like the blood vessels in their nails are incredibly long, or they're incredibly matted, or what have you. It can be very uncomfortable to get that groomed. My boy has been very nervous of. He's very sound sensitive in general, but very nervous of the sound of running water specifically. And we used to take him to a groomer to use. How they have like those big baths, so it's like not as echoey and scary. But honestly, I felt like I could support him better. I started doing it at home. So we've been like sponge bathing outside with stuffies and try to make it like the least scary that we possibly can. So there's no sound of running water and there's no like, what is that? Oh, it's just a toy, right? And that's been going a lot better for him. Cater to the individual, right? For hygiene, not aesthetics. So there are dogs out there who think grooming is fun and they've never had anything traumatic around grooming and it's just more attention for them, and after they have a bath they can go do like their post-bath zoomies and it's all fun, and for them you might be able to do grooming more for something aesthetic and take that extra time because for them it's enriching and that's great. But keeping in mind that when it is a stressful practice, we don't want to have to put them through it any more than they need to. Right, so there are certainly breeds of dogs that need haircuts and stuff. I wouldn't let a Shih Tzu like trip over its own hair. But for some of these cuts that are more fashion than function, we want to think about whether or not that is stressful for the dog or if it is a comfortable and happy experience. And I already touched on the dog coat type, so we'll leave that. A reminder that the Gab and Traz combo can be very useful for this as well, and fear-free methods can be applied here. And cooperative care can also be applied here, getting them used to handling in ways that you wouldn't normally handle them to make them more comfortable at the groomers. Okay, so of course I'm going to have a whole slide on Adopt, Own, Shop because we come from rescue, but I had referenced the statistic before. 2,300 dogs were put down based off of not having enough space in government shelters in 2021. So we can do better, moving forward, we can all make an effort to go to a rescue instead of a breeder. I'm sure if 2,300 people who went to a breeder in 2021 had gone to a rescue instead, right, maybe they wouldn't have not had that space. Any size, shape, breed, age, or temperament of dog that you're looking for can be found in a shelter if you're patient. There are so many shelters now, and foster-based nonprofits and stuff like that. There's lots of places to look. The ethics of breeding, I'll just touch on. That is a spectrum, of course. A breeder who is like taking the money they're making and funding it back into the breeding of care of those puppies and those dogs, and essentially breaking even just to try to make a healthy being is a lot different than like a backyard breeder, right? Those are very different things. However, I would still urge to adopt and not shop simply because of the what our species has done to this species, and it's kind of up to us to care for them and make it so that they shouldn't have to spend any time in a scary, isolating environment like a shelter, right? And I had already touched on that statistic. Consider the old, nervous, disabled, medical, and behavioral dogs, which is why I've chosen these guys. So here we have some dogs that I've worked with in the past. None of them are up for adoption anymore. Hope, very obviously a disabled dog. Very sweet, very dog-friendly, easy guy, really. Just took him a while to get adopted because of his chair there, but he is home now, and he does lots of like Algonquin camping and all kinds of awesome stuff. This is Benjamin, both old and behavioral. He was adopted in his old age when his resource guarding had calmed down quite a bit, thrived there, passed away in a loving home, which is We love to see it. This is Max. He passed away in the shelter, sadly. He was a medical boy, very friendly. He loved everyone. He was good with dogs as well. But not everyone is in a position to be able to financially take on a medical dog. And this is Ben. Ben is a good reminder that any size, shape, breed, age, or temperament of dog can be found in a shelter, because he is just a happy, healthy, like 2-year-old Belgian Malinois. Loved people, dog friendly. What a lot of people would sort of look for. It took him a year to get adopted, actually, but now he lives with his I think chocolate lab brother. Dogs are a 10+ year commitment. So obviously this is not the case if you adopted Benji. Like if you get a senior dog, obviously it's a shorter term commitment, and if that's what you're looking for, consider a senior dog, right? But otherwise you're looking at 10+ years, and you have to keep in mind how much can change in a decade. How many times can you move? How many times can you switch jobs? How many times can you live with somebody different? And would you be able to keep this dog through all of that change, right? Something to really consider before making the commitment of adopting a dog. A lot of that can change in just a year's time, right? Let alone 10 years. And surrendering a dog is an option. So I'll touch on that. It is an option, right? It's definitely there. But definitely it's a heavy decision. Be very aware of the impact that can be made mentally on a dog from being abandoned, and not just being abandoned, but being abandoned in that stressful, isolating environment, right? If it's between, having to euthanize this dog and surrender them, like I'm not saying don't surrender your dog. Like it is an option, it's there, but it's not always a success story, right? They are being put in a position where they may end up passing away in the shelter, right? Which is always tragic. And even, Jack, right, from the diet slide, where is he? This guy, right? He had one bite incident with his previous guardian, which we know to just be a warning, not a very scary thing. And he has now been stuck at the shelter for years, and nobody has had interest in him in a very long time. It is harder to adopt out dogs that are not dog-friendly. Unfortunately, he's not dog-friendly. So keep that in mind if the situation should ever arise where surrender crosses your mind. So we made it. Conclusion. So dependents are a priority. I had initially the priority, but obviously some people have children, so you might have multiple priorities. He is my main priority. Compromise is needed just like any other relationship. So I would think of this like a roommate. Right, when you move in and you have a roommate, you're not going to punish them for doing something in a way that you don't like. You're going to find a compromise so that you can live in the space both happy, both enjoying the space, both living in the natural way that you would be as your own species. And so keep that in mind for having patience for that. If someone is unable to meet the physical, mental, and emotional standard for a dog, consider rescuing different species for a companion, which, there are shelters full of, cats, rats, rabbits, guinea pigs, everything, right? There are so many other species that need homes, and dogs have very specific biological needs that they need as a species, just like any of those other species would. And perhaps if your financial situation, how much time you have, how much space you have is more conducive to a different species, then, give one of them a home instead. I mean, that's, of course, just as wonderful as giving a dog a home. Main takeaway, it's a lot of information in this presentation, and it's a lot of responsibility. Nobody's perfect. Do your best to put your dog's well-being first. Remember, there are fear-free and force-free methods to help support your dog. Be kind to yourself. None of us are as perfect as our dogs think we are, and that's okay. Just do your best. When you know better, you do better. And here is a lot of resources. So if you want any of these resources, there's also my email. You can email me. You can take a picture of this slide, both. Mostly I have a lot of Instagram pages and websites here because that's where I consume a lot of my information currently, but I know that's not the most accessible for everybody. So I can provide more or different ways of getting it. These are all local fear-free veterinary clinics. If you're looking for that, for a fear-free certified vet, and then just references for all the photos that I stole. So that's it.
Thank you very much. That was good.
Thank you.